Hey, hi, and welcome back to the Southern Millennial Mom podcast. I'm Samantha May, and I'm your official Southern Millennial Mom. As always, thank you so much to my returning listeners. You mean the world to me. I don't know who you are, but you keep coming back, and I really appreciate that. To all the new listeners, welcome. You missed a few episodes, and that is fine. I do highly recommend, even though it is a bit rough because it is my first episode and doing anything like this, I do recommend that you go check out episode 1. Let me introduce me. I feel if you're going to listen to a podcast or see a talk show, listen to a radio talk show, anything, you should get to know who you're listening to. And that's what that episode is about. It's you getting to know who I am. Maybe in the future, I might change it. So, I don't know. Things happen. As a quick recap of the last episode, I had an amazing interview, or really just a conversation with my mother-in-law. I am one of those lucky women who likes her mother-in-law, whose mother-in-law likes her. And we talked about what it's like being a mom of 9 to an empty nester. And if you have kids that are just about to move out, or you have kids that have moved out and there's nobody else in the house except for you and your significant other, and you don't know what to do with yourself, go check that out because it might be very helpful to you. There is a trigger warning for miscarriage, child loss. So if you are still struggling with that, I think timestamp for that is at minute 51 or an hour and 51. I can't remember exactly. I just know that the number 51 is in there. So if you still want to listen to that episode, but you don't want to have to hear about a miscarriage and healing from a miscarriage because you're not in that mind space just yet, that's the section that you can skip. It is about, there's that. I don't have any quirky segues into this episode or this series of episodes. I know a lot of the things that I've been talking about really is how I have taught my daughter how to do things and what I encourage you as parents or even aunts, uncles, grandparents to do with children. But I think I will start like just a series. It might be a short series, it might be a long series, I don't know. We'll figure out that fork in the road when we get there. But I want to start a series, even though I'm less 10 episodes in, about what we need to talk to our kids about. One thing that I highly encourage is if you suffer with anxiety, you need to talk to your kids about that. It is nothing to be ashamed of, and if they don't understand what you're going through, then how can they help you go through it and not make it worse? I have the primest of examples. So, at the recording of this episode, it is the week after Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is one of the hardest holidays, or the least enjoyable holidays for myself. We lost our dad the day before Thanksgiving 8 years ago. It is still hard. There are days I just get sad thinking about it. But there are days I'm like, he's no longer in pain, and he suffered from several health issues that if he had taken better care of himself, that he probably wouldn't have. But some things are just genetic, and it happens. He passed away in his sleep due to a heart attack, and that was probably one of the hardest days I have ever felt, emotionally and mentally, and a little physically as well. Going back to what the holiday means for me, before, I'll say in the past 3 years, 3 or 4 years, it hasn't been so hard, just not as enjoyable. And that may change later on in the future as Boo gets older and then I become a grandparent, if that is something she plans on supplying me with, grandkids. I usually I get a little anxious around this holiday, and due to the week-long vacation from my daughter's school, I unintentionally isolated myself from going out anywhere. So I needed something done. My husband would already be out because he went turkey hunting, deer hunting through most days of last week's holiday. I was at home most of the time. We did go do just a family outing, I think the weekend before or one day last week, and it was just a family fun day. But that was the only day I got dressed up a little bit. We went to a movie. We went to those places where they have pottery in different shapes and whatnot that you can paint. And we did that. That was basically all the outside activity that I did in that holiday week, which was a very big mistake for me because I do deal with social anxiety, and because my dad passed and we have not been in contact with my family, we didn't do anything actually on Thanksgiving. We had my husband's immediate family Thanksgiving and then the extended family Thanksgiving. As a fun little side note, I recently learned one of my sensory triggers, or I don't know if it's a sensory trigger, but it is a trigger that I didn't know the reason for until several months back. And it helped me deal with some anxiety that happens when I go and spend time with my husband's immediate family. So what the trigger for me is children screaming, even in play, in, frustration, in pain. Little kids scream and they can't, that's the only way that they can articulate that they are excited, hurt, upset, frustrated. That has been a trigger for me since becoming a parent. And that was one thing that I knew I didn't like. I didn't realize it was a trigger. I just knew I didn't like it. And growing up, I would constantly tell my daughter, you only scream when you are in danger or in pain. And she has done pretty well with that, even as a toddler, because she would see how upset I would get if she would scream, and sometimes I would react more than, I can't think of the other word, but I would react to it thinking immediately somebody's in trouble. And the reason behind this trigger is when I was very, very young. I think I was still in kindergarten at the time. I used to live on a corn farm in Illinois, and it was a shut-down corn farm. We had our corn crib, there was the barn, but next to this corn crib was several old cars that, they just no longer worked. A lot of the stuff was still in good condition, they just didn't work anymore. And one day, my brothers and the cousins that lived with me at the time, we were sliding down the windshield, which you shouldn't do, by the way, which you should tell your kids not to do, but we were sliding down the windshield, and, it was all great fun until I decided I would be the one to slide down, not on my butt, not on my back, but on my knees. And at the time, I believe I was just wearing a pair of shorts. I slid down on my knees. There was something very sharp or very pointy. Nobody else had come in contact with this, but apparently the universe was like, okay, you've had enough fun. It's time to stop. But I slid down on my knees. I caught whatever this was and I sliced my knee open. I'm not talking just this small gash. I'm talking very, very deep, at least a quarter of an inch deep. If I'm remembering correctly, because when I looked down, it's like I felt this sharp pain. I was like, oh, I scratched myself, darn it. But I looked down at my knee. It hadn't started bleeding yet, which was a miracle. But I look down, I see what looks like styrofoam. And I don't know if that's muscle. It probably was. It was probably muscle. And I very well could have seen, it probably went down to the bone. It was that deep. And for anybody that is listening and you are getting nauseous, I apologize. I'm almost done with that part of the story. I cut my knee. I look down and I see my knee has been split open. And I scream because blood starts coming out of this wound. I scream, and in my young mind, I think, oh no, I'm gonna die. Where is my mom? Because now, as a parent, if I would have heard my daughter scream like that, I would have stopped whatever I was doing to go run out and see what was happening. Unfortunately, my mother did not do that, because when I came in from hopping, 100 feet, maybe, but it felt like a mile, I was hopping on the other leg that wasn't injured, holding my skin together, still kind of screaming and crying. And I go into the house, my brothers rush into the house, and my mom comes to the door and says, "What's wrong?" I don't remember what she said, but what I remember after that, I don't remember at what point, she said, "I just thought you were play screaming," which to this day frustrates me, and that is probably what caused my trigger. The children screaming causes my anxiety to rise very quickly. Now, my husband, when our daughter was young, and neither one of us realized that it was a trigger, but he'd be like, "Oh, kids just scream. They do it when they're excited," and I would tell him, but I don't like it. It makes me feel bad. It doesn't make me feel good. And we just recently discovered that it is an anxiety trigger for me. That's the end of that story. But loud sounds, which is ironic, is an anxiety trigger for me. Like horns honking, a lot of people shouting, just to make themselves heard over other people. Which I say it's ironic because I was in the marching band, and during marching season, my section would sit directly in front of the drum line, and you would think that might have been a trigger. It wasn't, probably because, we were in an open space and it wasn't as loud as it could have been, but loud sounds and people shouting drives up my anxiety. And for the longest time, I didn't realize that I had anxiety. I just thought, I was being ridiculous in that kind of sense. It's like, why do I just want to leave my husband's parents' house, the family functions, after only being there for an hour? Why do I feel like there are ants crawling under my skin? I can't feel my palms. I can't do a lot of things. My brain doesn't focus. It starts to get fuzzy, and then I start to get irritable. I start to get depressed, and I didn't realize all of this really until we had our reset, as we like to call it, which was moving from the place we previously lived at to our current home. and I'm hoping if I can get everything edited properly. My husband and I recorded an episode of us just talking about everything under the sun, and hopefully I can get all of that stuff edited, and that might be the next episode after this one. There is a purpose for these actual rabbit trails. Well, instead of rabbit trails, these are hiking trails because they have a purpose. They have a place that they're leading to. Talking to our kids if we deal with anxiety, depression, or any other mental issue. The prime example I have is after isolating myself basically the entire Thanksgiving break, we had Thanksgiving with my husband's immediate family. And as one of 9 kids, all but 2 are married with kids. One just recently got engaged, the other one is still single, and then there's one that's married without kids currently. But we all gathered there, and my mother-in-law, the amazing woman that she is, she wanted to break up the monotony of turkey and dressing and cranberry sauce and things like that, because a lot of people have been going to relatives' house to do that kind of thing there. So she did something a little different. We had gumbo, we had seafood bisque, we had crab cakes, rice, a charcuterie board, cheese, crackers, sausage, spiced pickles, I'll call them. But we had all that stuff there. And I made the mistake of not bringing my water tumbler, which has my loop earplugs in them. And they're not the kind of earplugs that you can just cancel everything out, like those little squishy ones. I don't like those ones because they just sit weird in my ear holes, for lack of a better word. I forgot to bring these earplugs, which just dampen the sound a little bit and bring that decibel down, and does normally will help keep my anxiety at a tolerable level. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't take it was because in my head I was like, oh, my anxiety hasn't been out of control during family functions recently, and my husband is usually where I can find him and have easy access to a grounding technique. For me, a grounding technique is either just standing by my husband, grabbing hold of one of his belt loops or shirt. Just being in his presence is very calming for me. I don't know why, but there were times I couldn't find my husband, or he would be doing something and I would be like, the emotional side, or emotion brain, as I've heard it called, would be thinking, oh, he's spending time with his family that he doesn't get to see as often. It's fine. I can deal with this myself. Or another grounding technique for me is, I call them grounding techniques. It is not I don't think it's what anybody else calls them, but I like to call them grounding techniques. I will shift from group to group because the family likes to spread out sometimes. But for some reason, the group that I had been talking with previously had gone to a different room that I didn't even think to check, because they normally don't go in that room, but they're in a different room, and I was looking for them all over the house and I couldn't find them. And if they're listening, it is not your fault that I did not check this room. I found them by coincidence. The brother that recently got engaged, him and his fiance asked my youngest nephew and my youngest niece to be the ring bearer and flower girl in their wedding next year. And I just happened to be holding my niece at the time. And they knew where this other group of people was. And that is another grounding technique. And another one is just leaving the house completely for a temperature change. Unfortunately, it was a really nice day, very comfortable. So my in-laws didn't have the heat on real high, So it wasn't much warmer inside than it was outside. So I couldn't really use that grounding technique. So my anxiety was slowly building up. And because I wasn't recognizing the signs, even though I should have, I did not realize that my anxiety was rising. And one of the signs that I should have known was how heavy the food was sitting in my stomach when it was time to eat. And I didn't do a whole lot of snacking or eating the hors d'oeuvres beforehand. I had a few, but not enough to stifle any hunger I might have felt. My stomach was clenched enough that I should have known I don't really need to eat. It'll just upset my stomach later. But I did. I had a full bowl of gumbo and rice, some crab cakes, what else? Some turkey. My husband had smoked 2 turkeys for the extended family Thanksgiving, and they were absolutely delicious. So, honey, if you're listening to this, it doesn't matter that you forgot to inject them. They are delicious. Everybody else had basically overeaten when it came to the appetizers that were just laid out. And for them, they couldn't really eat a whole lot of what was for dinner. In my head, I'm like, I need to eat something or I won't eat anything later, and that'll cause me to be irritable later. So I was almost done eating when it was announced that somebody had made a cake for my brother-in-law and his fiance, and everybody got up from the table, including my husband, and left me at the table while I was still eating. At that point, the anxiety really kind of hit me and was like, I'm very upset at my husband for leaving me at the table instead of waiting for me to finish these few bites of whatever I was eating at the time. I haven't told him this. I need to, though, just so that I don't have those kind of feelings again, because I don't like them. I absolutely hate them because I feel bad as those thoughts are running through my head. But everybody had left to go get some of this dessert and go talk outside, and that brought up my anxiety even more and caused my stomach to clench even more. And another reason why I was upset about me leaving my water tumbler at home, it has become, as silly as it is, as basic as it has become my emotional support water tumbler. If I drink water, it's very relaxing. That's just it. It's just relaxing for me now. And this tumbler is great at keeping ice for a long time. I have only used it for water, so I haven't put anything hot in it yet. But if my husband is listening to this, I want another tumbler for hot things. Yes, I'm basic like that. But the day just kept going on, and my husband and his family, anytime we would get into basically the gathering area, the small dining nook. I say it's small, but a lot of people can fit there. People would start talking, and there would be several conversations going on, so the volume would rise because people would be trying to talk over each other. And I'm trying to remember what time we got home. It probably wasn't until 7 or 8, because it was pretty dark, other than, the just evening twilight kind of dark. But when it was time for us to go, I was like, oh, thank God. And I love my family. I love them so much, but it gets so loud. There was a point I was like, okay, I do notice that my anxiety is rising, and if they start getting loud, I will tell them to shush, that we don't need to shout, because, I'm not the only one that has to deal with that kind of anxiety, because when it gets loud, people get raucous, that R word that I can't remember how to pronounce, and it just gets overwhelming. But we were leaving, and I am one to listen to music either singing or just instrumental music. My music started playing as we were leaving, and, well, I'm going to back up a bit. When we were going to the immediate family Thanksgiving, we had to take two vehicles. One reason was because my husband was planning on doing some hunting that evening before it got too dark. It never happened. And another reason why was because we were dog sitting for my neighbor, and our boxer doesn't really like him. She tolerates him, but she doesn't like him. She'll start instigating, and my German Shepherd will start getting protective of the dog that we were dog sitting for, and they would get upset with each other, and it would just be chaos. They never really started fighting, just so anybody who's worried about it, and we weren't worried about that happening at all. But I didn't want those three dogs riding in the same vehicle together, so is another reason why we rode in two separate vehicles. When we were leaving, my husband had already left with the puppy. He also had to drive ahead of me because his low beam light bulbs had gone out of his truck, so he could only drive with his high beams on. And if anybody who had to suffer with the high beams in their eyes because of my husband's truck, I apologize. And I also had in my vehicle my daughter. And we left my in-laws. I was driving down the driveway, and I started realizing that I was getting irritated listening to the music that I normally listen to when I'm driving. I was like, no, I can't listen to this. I was out of the driveway and like halfway to the road that turns onto the highway that we use to get to my in-laws' house and to get home. I was like, I need something that's just noise. And I have the app Calm on my phone, and I also keep a pair of Bluetooth headphones in there if, I want to listen to an audiobook and my daughter's watching a movie and she doesn't want her headphones on, which is fine. I don't recommend that you do that, or if you have to do that, have it on awareness mode or have the volume at a very low level. But I was realizing that I was about to have an anxiety attack, or I don't know if you'd call it a panic attack. I wasn't feeling panicky. I was just overly anxious and overwhelmed mentally. So I used the Calm app and I pulled up green noise, which normally for me is extremely calming, and the road that I travel on to get to the highway to get to my house, it's very windy, and I don't like pulling into people's driveways unless I absolutely have to. Like, there's absolutely no choice whatsoever. If I have a choice to pull into the driveway or keep going, I will keep going. But I had on the logic brain, as again I've heard it called, that I needed to pull over to do some kind of grounding technique or do stimming, which for me is shaking out my hands, clenching my fist aggressively, especially if I'm super overwhelmed. But because I had my daughter and our two dogs in my vehicle, my emotional brain was going, no, I can wait until I get home. I'll be just fine until maybe I'll pull over in a gas station parking lot to do that. I didn't do that. I drove home, and normally if I have something blasting at full volume in my headphones, it usually blocks out everything around me, which again is not something that I recommend when you're driving, especially if you're listening to music, audiobooks, podcasts, things with words where you really have to concentrate on. But I didn't really have to concentrate on the green noise playing at full blast in my ears. And I know a lot of people like, oh, you could have put yourself in danger. You could have put your child in danger. You could have put your dogs in danger. I could have. What was worse was that I was experiencing an anxiety attack the entire drive home with no logic mind working. My emotional brain was like, I can get home. I can get home. I can't stop. The dogs need to be at home. Boo needs to be at home. I need to be at home. I can wait until we get home to do this. And that was the emotional part of my brain, which was so much louder than the logical side of my brain. And I do realize that this is not the point of this podcast. I realize I'm dragging it out, but these facts for me are important. But we finally get home. I'm still feeling the anxiety just exploding in me, feeling so overwhelmed. But physically, I'm masking. I look fine. I sound fine. I'm trying not to snap at my daughter for asking me questions because she doesn't realize I'm having an anxiety attack, which for her, she doesn't deal with that I know of. Should probably ask her about that. But she doesn't know I'm dealing with that. And because I was masking the entire time, unintentionally at my in-laws' house, my husband didn't realize that was what was going on. And my husband had gotten home before I did. The people that we were dog sitting for got home were home by the time we got home. So he was taking the dog back and all the stuff that came with the dog. And he was talking with the neighbor. And I come in the house. I let my dogs out of my truck. I tell my daughter to do something. And then I think I just told her to eat something quick for dinner. Because we had a relatively big and late lunch. But we got home. I took all the things inside that I needed to take inside. I set it all down. And she was starting to ask me questions about things. And I tried to calmly tell her, I need a minute. Please don't ask me anything. Please don't talk to me. Because it's one of the things, if I'm dealing with an attack like that, I don't want to be talked to. I need quiet. For a little while, she's like, okay. But then my husband came in the house and she started talking to my husband. And as he was coming into the house, I was stimming really, really hard. I was almost to the point of hurting myself, shaking out my hands, squeezing my fists, and just feel something to get physical, to get out of this state of mind. And I was doing all of this in my bedroom with my bedroom door open. I had only turned on the light that is on my vanity at a very low setting. And my husband started talking to my daughter, and my daughter started talking to my husband. And he doesn't really see me stimming because it's relatively dark in the bedroom. I'm really in shadow as I'm pacing another grounding stimming technique for me. He turns on the light, and I turn around and I say, turn off the light. My eyes are closed. I am stimming, and I can't see his face, but he knows something is wrong. And my daughter's still trying to talk to him at this point, and he turns around and he tells her, okay, we need to be quiet. Your mom is going through something right now, so let's wait until later to talk about this thing. And it clicks in her head. She knows, okay, mom really needs me to be quiet. And I am pacing toward my husband. I can feel his presence, like his physical presence. And he grabs hold of my shoulders, try to rub them to release whatever tension I have. But I am at the point I want nobody to touch me. And I do not find comfort in touch a whole lot, especially while I am dealing with an attack. I told him, no, don't touch me. And my eyes are still closed at this point. And he goes into the kitchen, and I hear my daughter ask him something, and I hear him whisper back, she's having an anxiety attack, so we gotta be quiet. Or something along those lines. And he comes in with the jar of kosher salt and says, here, put this in your mouth. Not the whole jar, just a very small pile of it. And I know from TikTok that salt is a good way to get somebody out of a panic attack or an anxiety attack. It's that instant physical change of flavor or texture, depending on the kind of salt that you use. We only had kosher salt, so it was very rough texture and obviously very salty. And it was a ridiculously large pile. It wasn't too huge, it was a little bit bigger than a pinch, but I put it in my mouth and it helped. It started helping. And my poor husband, he knows what to do, but he didn't know what to do. He wants to help me. And, by then I have grounded myself just a little bit, just enough to open my eyes to look at him. When I look at him, his hands are just hovering around me, and he's like, I don't know what to do. What can I do to help? I'm like, I need to take a shower. And he's like, all right, I'll go start the bath for you. And I told him, no, I need a shower. I need to feel the hot water running down my entire body. I need to clean off, and I need to be in the shower. And I told him the whole temperature thing, that there's no temperature difference between the house and the outside at the Thanksgiving, immediate family Thanksgiving. He's like, okay, I'll go get it started for you. And we have one of those, what do we call it, an electric heater. It looks like one of those electric heaters that used to be in apartment buildings that probably still are, like in New York or Chicago. And one that looks like that in our closet. And he's like, you should probably if you want a temperature change, you should just go into the closet. I was like, I thought of that, but we had left the closet door open, so it wasn't nearly as hot as warm as I would have needed it to be in that room. And I had turned up the temperature so that it could warm up both the closet and the bathroom while I was taking a shower. But he turned on the shower, he pulled both of our dogs out of the room, and was like, go take your shower, I'll be out here waiting. And I was probably in the shower for approximately 20 minutes, and I come out, and instead of going out and being with my family as I normally would have done, I stayed in our bedroom because I have to have it pretty cool, or at least cold, in my bedroom to sleep comfortably at night. And my husband accommodates me for that. And I love him so much for that, because the window that we keep open is on his side of the bed. Anyways, that was a useless rabbit trail. But it was still, there was that humid, hot temperature in the bathroom from the shower. It felt amazing. Most of what I was feeling had gone away because of that. But I got out of the shower, dried off, and then went and did another grounding technique. For me, I like to call it adult tummy time. I'm just laying on my stomach on my bed. It has to be my bed, because I can lay across it horizontally, comfortably with my legs hanging off. And that seems so silly every time I think about it, but it works for me. And I'm messing around on my phone for at least another 30 minutes before I can finally open our bedroom door and my husband can see that I have finally gotten past this. And he's like, "Is there anything that I can do for you?" I'm like, "No, I just need to go to bed." And I'm still dealing with, at this point, a very clenched stomach. The food that was from dinner or late lunch, whatever you want to call it, lupper, it's still sitting heavy and uncomfortable, and I'm not comfortable sleeping. But I needed to sleep because the next day we had the extended family. And as we were getting ready for bed and everything, I turned to my husband and I was like, "Okay, at this moment, I don't think that I can go to the extended family Thanksgiving because there are at least 10 times as many people at that gathering that there was at my in-laws." I told him that, and then I was like, "We will see how I am feeling in the morning after I had made my mashed potatoes and homemade cranberry sauce." One other thing that I realized the next day, or maybe before we went to bed, I had 2 highly caffeinated beverages. I had really caffeinated coffee in the morning and less than an hour between finishing that and starting a triple shot espresso iced coffee, the ones that you can get from the convenience store. I downed that almost as soon as we got to the immediate family Thanksgiving thing, which I hadn't intended on doing, but I needed something to drink when we got there because I didn't have my water cup, and I also needed something to do with my hands, something to occupy my hands because I don't carry fidget toys, which I should probably consider doing, but a lot of the clothes I wear don't have pockets, which sucks. Anyhow, and then I had another cup of coffee maybe an hour before we left, which was in the evening, and I don't think it was decaf, which, Monty, if you're listening to this, you should probably make it and don't tell anybody it's decaf, but if they're listening to it, then they probably know. Anyways, and that was not helping my stomach situation. But in the morning, I felt much better, even though my sleep wasn't very good. I'd wake up every couple of hours, and at some point my acid reflux was kicking in, and I had to get up and chug some Pepto-Bismol, and that helped a little bit. The next day, my husband asked me, "Are you going to be okay? Are you going to stay home, or are you going to be okay to go to the extended family?" I told him I'm fine to go, and sometimes when I have a very big reaction to overstimulation and have a mild anxiety attack, because I'm not feeling panicky. Maybe I am. I don't know. I need to be officially diagnosed with anxiety or panic issues. But it's like, normally when I have suffered one of those kind of attacks, I will tell my husband that I need him to stay by me so that he's within easy reach for grounding. I didn't tell him that this time, but that I was going to need him close to me, and he stayed with me. And there was a point I knew he wanted to go talk with some people that he hadn't seen in a while, that he doesn't get to talk to a lot. I was like, "I'm fine, you can go." And he kept bringing me drinks, even though I had my water cup, which had my loops on them in case I needed them. He was even more attentive than he usually is after one of those attacks. And the night before, he's like, I didn't like that. And I jokingly went, I didn't like that either. And he said it again, it's like, I didn't like having to go through that with you because I didn't know what to do and I couldn't help. And I told him, I know. And you helped in ways that you could, even though he didn't feel like he was helping. And this is where I kind of get into talking a little bit more about talking to your kids. My daughter has had the conversation with me, about when I am feeling overwhelmed. My daughter, we have sat her down while going through check-ins, which I highly encourage that you do. I will link the To Be Better YouTube podcast site, page, whatever you want to call it, and they have the links for anything that they talk about, if I remember. During one of the check-ins, we had to talk to my daughter about my attacks and what can be noticed, what she can notice me doing if I'm starting to become overwhelmed. And we showed her if she sees me shaking up my hands, squeezing my fists, pacing with my eyes closed. Those are things that indicate I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling anxious, I guess in some cases panicky, that she needs to either leave the room and so I can be by myself and not have to worry about somebody else in the room, or she just needs to be quiet, or she can help accommodate me when I'm going through all of that kind of thing. But we've had that conversation with her, but it is just recently that we've done that. And when I was going through a heavily depressive state, I did not know how to talk to her about that. And as silly as so many people think it is, TikTok has taught me so much. It has taught me how to ground myself. It has taught me a lot of stimming techniques that other people use. Well, I don't know if they taught me that, but a lot of people will show different ways that people will stim, and that's what it's called. I didn't know, about the anxiety and depression and things like that until TikTok, because nobody talks about that kind of stuff, especially with their kids, because parents today, or parents of my generation, we were taught that you have no reason to be anxious. You have no reason to be sad if you have depression. And you really don't have a trauma. You just didn't like being punished or anything like that, unless it really was in whoever's eyes is traumatic, like SA, DV, other things that can be traumatic. And I went through a lot of trauma in my childhood, but I knew in my logical brain that I needed to talk to my daughter about this so that she can understand, what she needs to do to either help me or to put herself away, to not be in a situation where she might cause something even worse to happen. And that is just something that we started recently talking to her about, because I guess really she kind of understands it more now. But I think you should be talking to kids that if they can understand right from wrong and be able to make knowing decisions or be able to help you do things around the house, then you can start talking to your kid and don't feel embarrassed about it. Because there are so many people who go through worse situations, who have worse reactions to certain things. If you get anxious at a party or a family gathering, you can tell your kids, hey, I need your help doing this, or I need you to do this for me. Talk to your kids about this so that in case there is a classmate that is going through something similar, they can help them in the future. And I need to, again, talk to my daughter about this kind of thing, just to refresh it in her mind. And my daughter is all about helping somebody that is struggling, but she is always so willing to help me too. And that is something that I will always encourage for her, but also something I will tell her. Some people just don't want help. They want to suffer, and that's not her problem, which it hurts her, but as she gets older, I think she'll really understand it. I don't want my daughter to have to wonder why I am always in my room with the door closed, with me either watching a show, watching things on my phone, playing games in my room, again, with the door closed, with her not having to wonder if I go in mom's room, is she going to yell at me? Is she going to be upset that I interrupted her time to decompress? And yes, there are times when I go in my room, I shut my door, and I just need to be alone because for some reason I'm feeling overwhelmed by something. But she knows she can't just barge in there, and she always knocks. She has to ask me a question, and I can't get upset with her if it's something she doesn't know or she actually needs help on. She is of the age and the mindset where she forgets or she just doesn't want to do things because, she's gonna be a teenager soon. She's a tween right now. And yes, I do get frustrated sometimes when she knocks and needs to ask me a question when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and everything. But I tell her, you're just gonna have to wait. This is the time that I need to decompress, or things like this. We can't keep our kids in the dark about our mental situations. Now, I'm not saying that you need to trauma dump. Never trauma dump on your children. If they ever have questions about why you are in this way, why you have panic attacks, why you have anxiety, why you have mental triggers or whatnot, hopefully they'll ask when they're old enough to understand. But don't ever trauma dump on your kids because they do not need to carry that burden. That is the job of your significant other if they're not the reason for the trauma. Your partner in life is there to help you carry these burdens, not your children. But you can't talk to them and let them know if certain actions cause you anxiety or things that they do cause you to go into a panic attack, or if the way that they're talking or just doing things makes you start to feel depressed. There are so many things that happen with our mental state that we don't know how to talk to our kids, and we don't have a professional to talk to. There are parents that are single parents, either by choice or by circumstance, and they don't have somebody to talk to about what's going on with them mentally. You can talk to your kids on how they can help you deal with certain situations, but we're not going to trauma dump again. We want to talk to our kids on how they can help. Like I said before, if they can help you through certain situations, they can help somebody else in the future. And this is not, I don't think this is a mental thing. This was a physical thing that happened. There was this TikTok that went around for a while. This mother, this family, they had indoor security cameras, and this mom had this issue that sometimes her body would seize up, and while she wouldn't have a full seizure, her body would seize. And she taught her kids how to help her through that. And one day, they're all, the mom and the kids are home, and she's going through one of these things, and she's not breathing. And her son walks up to her, and as violent as this sounds, he punches her in the stomach, causing her to take a deep breath and get her out of this. And I don't know everything, the conversations that went on before or after this, but I'm pretty sure she told her children, if you ever see me doing this, I'm not taking a breath, I'm not doing what I need to do to get out of this situation, go to the extreme and do these kind of things. And that probably terrified her son, that he had to do that to get her out of this, whatever was going on with her. But we can't be afraid to talk to our kids on how they can help us. Yes, we want to be perfect in the eyes of our children. But I have said it, and I will say it again, you will only ever be perfect if you're dead, because there is no such thing as the perfect mom, the perfect dad, the perfect child. Because that's impossible, because everybody has a different definition of what's perfect for them or for themselves. It is okay to let your children see you admit you're wrong to your partner, to your significant other. It is okay to apologize for making a mistake. It is okay to let them see that you are not superhuman. You are not this infallible creature that, yes, you want them to strive to be like you sometimes, but you don't want them to have to try so hard to reach that bar that they see that you've set, only to get themselves hurt by falling because they can't reach the bar you've set. So talk to your kids about these things, because it is so important for your mental health. It is important for their mental health sometimes. That is how you grow as a family. To have a good relationship with your kids, sometimes you have to admit there are things that go wrong in your life. That you have to admit that you deal with anxiety and you're not leaving the birthday party because you're bored. You are leaving the kid's birthday party because you are emotionally overwhelmed. You are mentally overwhelmed, if that is not something you grew up doing as a kid. But it is okay not to be perfect. It is okay to tell your children that you're not perfect. It is okay to let them know you have problems. It is not okay to continuously bottle up those problems and then explode at your children for the tiniest mistake because you just bottled it up. It is not okay to get angry at your child because you are mentally unwell. It is not okay to punish a child for something that you did wrong. That is wrong. Let's have open conversations with our kids about our mental issues, because sometimes it really will help them learn how to help you, how to cope with what's going on. But we are not going to trauma dump on our kids. If they have questions when they're younger, when they're too young to really understand it, just say, I'll set a date in the calendar when you're older to have this conversation. We will come back to this conversation, to this question, when you are older and can comprehend what me telling you this thing could affect your life. Because I think if my mother, and I'm trying not to bring her in on any of these anymore, because it is just bringing up unpleasant feelings for me. But I think if my mother had told me, the things that I'm talking to my daughter about, I wouldn't have gone through certain situations in life. I would not be as mentally fractured or emotionally fractured as I was before I met and was able to have open conversations with my husband. If she had had those conversations with all of her kids and helped us understand what she was going through, then our lives probably would have been so much more different. One thing I'm not doing it, and it seems kind of like a double standard. My husband and I are talking about this, and we're talking about other things. But if you are struggling with your mental health, there are places to go to talk to somebody that could help you. You know, it doesn't have to be a psychiatrist. You can go to church groups. You can go to a community center that might have group sessions or have somebody talk to you one-on-one. And sometimes you just need to talk. You don't need anybody to respond, to try to fix your problems. You just need to get it out of your head, just like I'm doing right now. Personally, I don't feel like I need to go see a professional. I probably do, with a lot of the stuff that happened to me before I met my husband. For me, getting all of this out, talking to you on how you can help yourself, you can help your husband, you can help your significant other. Me talking to you about these things. This is very cathartic for me. And I know I always go on rabbit trails. I reiterate a lot of the things that I said in the same episode or in previous episodes, but I do it to stand by my beliefs, to make sure anybody listening knows this is a serious issue for me, or this is important for me to get out there. It's kind of like reruns for a TV series or flashbacks, so that you can get refreshed on what happened to a character in the show and why they're behaving the way they are. And I love reruns. There are some shows they could do without a whole lot of excessive backgrounds, because a lot of the backgrounds in anime shows, it's stuff that was going on with other characters that, like, how would the main character know what happened to villager number 6 if they weren't in the same area? That never made sense to me. But anyways, I think that's where we're going to end with anime flashbacks for this episode. And just to, again, reiterate, talk to your children if you are struggling with your mental health. Even if you are talking to a professional, or you're in a counseling group or somewhere, even if you're talking to other people, your children also need to know, so that they know how to help, how to avoid, if it's necessary, to give you space so that you can heal, and that's also helping. But let's talk to our kids and not be afraid that they aren't going to see you in the same light. Sometimes that pedestal that our kids have put us on is just too high, and we need to get back down to ground level so that they know mom's not perfect, and that's why I love her. Dad's not perfect, and that's why I love him. Grandma's not perfect, and that's why I love her. Grandpa's not perfect, and that's why I love him. But if you have any comments, questions, advice, recommendations, you can send those to southernmilennialmoms@gmail.com. Keep it clean, keep it kind. But, I almost forgot. It would help this podcast grow so much if you would like, subscribe, review, comment on this podcast, whether it's on YouTube, Rumble, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to. Leave something so that this podcast can grow. And that's all. With all those comments, questions, and the other things, keep it clean, keep it kind, but keep it real. Okay, I love y'all. Bye.